I'm going to create like...
Graeme, there was a
Yes.
mishap here. You were muted on the stream, and that is
Oh.
on me. So a quick recap for people who are just joining or who joined like 5 minutes ago. This is Graeme in the bottom right corner. He will be talking. He's the author of Micronaut and the founder of the application framework. And this session is about introspection in the records, which is the new feature in JDK 16. Yes, and here's a sample project where Graeme will show the support for those on a sample Micronaut application. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I'm sure it wasn't that interesting anyway in that 10-minute space. But anyway, yeah, let's look at I was just going to say, let's look at like a history of where this like came from, right? Which is from the venerable Java Bean. So a Java Bean is essentially a class where you have, like, for example, some property like this that typically are private, and then you have getters and setters for each of those, and then you would want like probably, if you want to stick them in sets and collections and so forth, you would probably want like some kind of hash code and equals implementation that you could generate with your IDE. And then, maybe you would also want like a two-string implementation of what it looks like. And suddenly you have all this code like just for these two properties, right? So in like traditional like Java, there was a class called for Java Beans called the Introspector. So I don't know if any of you guys have used this, but it's essentially, if you do introspector java.beans introspector.get bean info Java Bean, like so. Probably, because this is a really old API, it throws checked exceptions all over the place. And that would give you the bean info, and then you could like iterate over the property descriptors like this, and that would essentially like do something like give you information about each property of the Java Bean. So if I ran this in like JUnit5, you can see that I actually have three properties. That you have the class property. Class, all objects have a get class method. You have age, class, and name. So this API was used pretty extensively to kind of read information about classes in Java Beans as it happened, and also allow them to be dynamically created, instantiated, and so forth by reflection. And so the Bean Introspect API has been around for some time. If we look at the signature, it doesn't actually say how long it's been there, but it's been here for since Java 1.1, so a long time. It's been there. And it's all reflection based, so it uses all sorts of security, contexts and so forth to basically reflectively read the descriptors and so forth. And it was used extensively in Swing and also in frameworks like Spring and so forth. To find out about all the properties on a particular Java Bean or component. So in Micronaut, we of course wanted to support the same kinds of use cases in terms of figuring out what properties exist on a particular Java Bean, and being able to instantiate them dynamically, but without being coupled to the Java Bean spec itself. So and without using reflection either. So in Micronaut, what you can do is you can add introspective onto a Java Bean. And then instead of using this this java.beans.introspector API, what you can instead do is do bean introspection, get introspection Java Bean, like so, and that will give you the introspection. And then you can do introspection.get property names, and iterate all over those, and pretty much accomplish the same use case, right? Where we have property name and age. Now, in our case, we don't include the class property because that's considered internal and never really needed in real world. And the difference with this API is that it's compilation time based, right? So a bean introspection is produced at build time for this class, and that allows me to analyze it without using reflection. And you can also do things like, for example, I can do things like introspection.instantiate to instantiate a new instance of my bean, and for that set not null, for example, and there's my bean. And then you can of course do things like introspection. There is another class called bean wrapper. You can wrap the property access, but otherwise I can do bean introspection get required property name, for example, which will give me the name property, bean property, and from there I can do bean property dot set path in my bean and some value, right? And then I can write set equals, replace that with the static import, some value bean dot get name, right? So what I'm doing here is from the bean introspection, I'm getting the name property, which is a bean property, and I'm calling set on it bean to set it some value, and that sets it on my bean object. So I can essentially also retrieve property values. So I can do bean property dot get bean in here as well and dynamically retrieve values. Now, calling set and get on the bean property does not use reflection at all. So without using reflection, right? So I can instantiate an instance of the Java Bean without using reflection. I can set properties, I can get properties, and that's the value of introspection. And so where are they used in Micronaut? They're used extensively throughout Micronaut for many use cases. For example, we plug into Jackson, the JSON library, and allow you to serialize and deserialize JSON without using reflection through our Bean Introspection API, and that is far more efficient in terms of we don't have to rely on a library such as Jackson has this library called Afterburner, which improves performance of serializing and deserializing objects by generating proxies at runtime. We don't have to generate those proxies at runtime; they're already constructed at build time, which is significantly more efficient, and it's completely not tied to the existing Java.Beans API, which was reflection based and so on and so forth. The other thing that you can do is in with the Java Bean spec was you could place annotations. For example, I could say the name shouldn't be blank. You could place them on the private field of that bean definition, but you could also place them on the getter. So from a kind of framework library developer's perspective, that's already creating a massive challenge in terms of you have to kind of merge the annotation information from the getter and the field. Micronaut automatically does that for you. So if I look at this bean property that I've retrieved the name property, and I can do things like bean property, int value, size, max, or else -1, something like that. And that will give me the maximum value of the size annotation specified on that property. So you can see that this will actually equal 20 because I specified a max value of 20 on the size annotation. So from the bean property, you can access the annotation values, again, without using reflection, without having to like retrieve the private field, without having to retrieve the method, without having to fuse the different metadata together. In this case, the size property is on the method. But I could also write another assertion here that says bean property has annotation, not blank. And that would also pass, because it does have an annotation called not blank, even though it's on the field. The kind of logical view of the annotations is represented by the bean property, which is really nice. So that is the Bean Introspection API. The other thing is it's like really flexible when it comes to construction. So if I had a constructor that took in a particular value, here I could pass that in the instantiate method, and pass in some value whenever we instantiate an object, and that works fine as well. So yeah, there is lots of different ways in which the Bean Introspection API is appropriate. And this API, what we have done with records is essentially apply the same thing on top of it. So I can do record Java Bean, or rather than do that, let's just create another record. Give me Oleg. Can you hear me, Oleg?
Yeah, absolutely.
Give me one moment, because there is somebody frantically ringing the bell.
No worries. Right. All right. We are back to us. This is a good moment to maybe ask questions. If you have any questions about anything, to be honest, now is the good time. Do you think, like personally, like there are people in the chat watching, like how often do you, this is the question that I was meaning to ask, like in general, the Java developers that they can sort of reach somehow through social and everything. How often do you actually use reflection yourself, right? I don't think this is something that most people do, but if you actually, like in the last months, let's say, have you written a line of code that says like, oh, class get method like invoke or something, or class get fields and like something like that? Do you write reflection based code in general, or is it something that people write only in libraries? That's what I would be interested to hear. So if you have any experience with that, just drop a line in chat. Maybe we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
Now Graeme is back, so let's do this.
I think it's definitely something that's done primarily by libraries. So most, a lot of Java applications today are using reflection. So either through something like Hibernate or Jackson or something like that. So yeah, let's have a look at the record equivalent now, and create a record. So look at all this code. We have like 60 lines of Java code here, and the record is so much simpler, right? So I can create I don't know, person record, whatever you want to call it, this is person class, and just define string name and its age, and that is a record, and that is essentially the equivalent of this class, which is insane from a kind of syntactic point of view. It's really, really huge improvement. Now, it's important to note some aspects about records. So for one, they are immutable. They cannot be. They are final. And we have like an automatically generated hash code, equals hash code implementation, and two-string implementation out of the box. So even these parts of the code down here, where I'm like manually defining hash code and two-string and equals, are automatically implemented for you by the compiler, which is really nice. And the cool thing is that with Micronaut, you essentially can apply and introspect it to records. Now, one thing to note, you mentioned libraries, Oleg, is that actually not many people in a Micronaut code base, you don't that often see introspected on a class, because it's typically used as a kind of meta annotation on top of another annotation. So for example, for Micronaut data JDBC, you would have mapped entity on here, then you wouldn't have introspected. And if you look at mapped entity, it's kind of meta annotated with introspected, right? So it becomes introspected just by the fact that you're using Micronaut data, right? But anyway, that's kind of diverging from the topic. So you add introspected, and the other thing about records is you can apply those same annotations to record components. So I can, and there's no ambiguity about what goes on the field and what goes on the getter, like Java Bean. You just define them like that on the name field, and that's as simple as it is. Now, for one thing that's really important that I didn't cover, that I covered here is, with the Java Bean version, Java Beans have getters and setters, and they hold mutable state. So, in this case, I'm setting the Bean property. So clearly that's not possible with records, right? They are immutable. So if I were to write another test up here, where we're going to test my Bean introspection for records, and what you will see is that I can get hold of Bean introspection for my person record, like so, and with this introspection, I can instantiate it, and I have to pass all the constructor arguments. So, person that is Fred, who's maybe 30 years old, and that will give me a person called Fred, which I can then apply assertions to that. Fred dot name. So that's another thing that trips me up every time I use records, being so used to Java Bean, is that record components don't have the get prefix. It's just name to retrieve the value, and that's it. So we have obtained an introspection for a record. We've instantiated it, and we're asserting the result. So one of the nice things as well is, we can do assert equals checks on records. If I pass new person Fred 30 and I instantiate this, I can you can see that this equals check will pass as well. because I automatically have this equals hash code implementation for my record, which is really nice. So all of that is really cool. Now, one thing that, like I said, I mentioned is you cannot. So if I were to do something, so for records, we model bean properties as record components. So I can still do get required property name to get the name property, for example, and we just model them with the same API. So whether you're using records or you're using Java Beans to kind of introspect your components, it doesn't matter. So, but one thing that's important to note is that if I try to do name property Fred and set it to something else, let's see what happens. You'll see that fails with a unsupported operation exception. You cannot write a read-only property called name. You're doing something very naughty there. That's definitely not allowed. And there's actually some logic on here where you can, on the name property, where you can say set through name property is read-only. And you'll see that record components, I have to comment about that setting. Record components are by default represented as read-only bean properties, right? So you can't just call set on them. Having said that, there are many cases where you may or want to mutate a record components property, and clearly calling set doesn't work. When programming with immutable objects, it's quite common to use the copy constructor approach, right? Where you create a additional constructor where you might have something like person with name, string name, and then you would do return new person name, and grab the age from the record component. You might do something like this, right? And then when you're actually working with your record component, you would do something like Bob to change the name of the person, and you would get Bob, right? So now and this instance is clearly a whole new instance. It's not Fred, it's a whole other instance, right? This is a fairly typical pattern, and one of the things that I hope that records replace is Lombok, because hopefully with records, Lombok will one day go away, because it replaces one of the big main cases with for Lombok, which is the data type and the with a pattern. So Lombok has this with a pattern feature where it will generate with a method and so forth. The bad thing about Lombok is it's kind of mutating the Java AST in an annotation processor, which is not a good idea in general. So these with methods is quite it's quite a typical pattern when you're dealing with mutable objects. When you want to construct an instance from existing state, you would define something like this. Now, luckily, Micronaut will, for you at compilation time, construct with the methods. So the compiler will actually, on the property, allow you to do with value Fred and Bob, and get Bob back. Now you can see that the resulting object, Bob.name, is Bob, right? So Micronaut at compilation time will build out reflection-free with methods that allow you to return a new instance of a record with a particular property changed, which is really nice, because from a framework from a framework's perspective, we don't have to, depend on the user defining with name or whatever other method that they particularly might have, which is a very nice convenience. So that you can instantiate, and of course all of this is allows for dynamic use cases where you're dynamically instantiating records. And this support for one of the big use cases for this is in Micronaut data JDBC. For example, I can turn this component into a map entity that maps onto Micronaut data, and we can make this, for example, the ID, and the ID can be a generated value that is nullable for the database ID of this person. And then I can come in here and I can define a person repository like so. Repository, if I can spell. And make this a JDBC repository with a dialect of H2. There we go. It extends from CRUD repository. And now I can come in here and inject my person repository into my test. And probably, I already have something set up. So test JDBC, right? So, typically, if I just delete this for the moment, where I'm instantiating person directly. So typically when you first create a record that you're going to insert into the database, right, you don't have an ID, right? So you might want to define a additional constructor that doesn't include the ID. So one of the nice things about records is you can have multiple constructors. And you can have, so this is like the primary constructor, and all of these guys are like secondary constructors that you can add in addition. And you can specify a null ID for when you first create an instance, right? If the ID is generated. But the nice thing is it allows Micronaut, for example, if I do save and put in a new person, Fred 30, and then I use the return object from the save method, you'll see that Fred.id is not going to be null when I actually perform the insert. Repository is null. Oh, I have to make this a Micronaut test in order to get dependency injection working. And then it'll boot up. So there you go, you see. So this is an example of, a case where Micronaut data needs to basically insert the entity, but then mutate it to set the null ID to an actual value before returning it from the repository so that you can retrieve the database ID. And this is using the test that I just deleted, the with value feature of BeanIntrospection. So getting a hold of BeanIntrospection person.class and getting the required property name, string.class, to get a hold of my property. If you remember, I had that with value method. So basically what Micronaut data is saying is it's saying with value, in this case ID, and returning my generated database identity with a new value of whatever the database ID was, and returning it. So that's been introspections and records. So I think with Micronaut we have evolved. Micronaut's built in support for introspections to deal with records and evolving it to deal with immutable applications. And the nice thing about Micronaut data JDBC it's already, it's evolving to be ready for kind of immutable state. And it's because it's built on these this Bean Introspection API. So that is today's little mini lightning talk. You think about that, Oleg?
That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. I knew that Micronaut generates the helper classes and the helper methods for like at the annotation processing time, right? For introspection and things, but I didn't have like consciously like thinking. I haven't thought about this, like how it would be implemented, right? So I think this is very neat, right? I like that the records, they're new, right? So they provide like the syntactic sugar for, and not the syntactic sugar, I'm sorry. Like, and I had a stream with Nikolai Parlog where he taught me about records a little bit. So it's not syntactic sugar, it's a new semantic thing, right? They expose the whole state, right? So, but this new concept that is available kind of fits nicely into the existing abstraction.
Yeah.
And I assume that the existing code in various like components of Micronaut doesn't need to be changed that much to support this.
Yeah, I think that the compilation time nature we managed to produce to essentially adapt, looking at the Java Bean conventions to working with records over the same API, and that has like ripple effects of like lots of things just start working throughout the framework, right, without having to like do much. But there's bigger considerations with regards to getting tools and APIs into developers' hands that allow building real apps, right? And database access with records is, I think, a potential area that needs to be explored and thought about, because like obviously the ID being a generated value is just like one example. But for example, it's very common in Micronaut to have at date created and have a local date time here, and at last updated, or I think it's at date updated, and have another last updated, and Micronaut will automatically and maybe popular those with null at the beginning. Micronaut will automatically Micronaut data will automatically populate those values, which are so often used in database applications for auditing and so forth, and keeping track of when things were created, when things were updated. And once again, we that through the use of introspections and with value, we are able to propagate that information into the final record that gets inserted into the database, because things like for a tool like Micronaut, it needs to populate these for the date time on first insert, and then for date updated every time it's updated and so forth. And propagate that back to through the API to the user.
Right. No, this is really, really nice, and I like how it looks in the code. So this is I look at this, and this looks like the code that I would enjoy writing a lot, right? So there are some annotations, you sort of slap the data annotation on your class, and you get the Lomboked kind of data class, right? And here you also add annotations, and you kind of like push the boundaries what a record is, not what the record is, right? Like how the outside world sees the record a little bit. I'm not sure, like personally, I'm not sure if this fits with the concept of records as this entity that exposes its old state and like it's immutable. But I certainly like the look and feel from the programmer's point of view for this.
Yeah, well, I think that in general, where records are used is going to be exploratory activity. The the Micronaut supports records in a number of different places right now, and one of them, for example, is in configuration classes. So you can do like things like record configuration properties, person, and have things like this, and then
Sorry, just to confirm, then for the configuration with the record, right? Then I can have the application YAML file with the configuration with the block person that will have person name, person age, right? And those will be injected,
right, yeah.
and I would have the configuration object that I can like inject into my controller or something and use those values without actually writing almost any code to wire together the YAML file and my controller class. That is super cool. That I like a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. You can do over here just person.name, Joe, age 40, and then I will wire those values into the configuration class. And immutable configuration, that makes a whole bunch of sense to me. And also being able to like check equals hash code of is my configuration equivalent to another configuration, or that kind of thing. Makes a whole bunch of sense.
So last week I learned from Pavel Gresha, like we had a stream about deploying Micronaut apps into Kubernetes, right? And then there was this nice annotation, Refreshable. I think it was Refreshable, right?
Yeah.
Can I use Refreshable with the record configuration like this? Will it like generate a new record for me and inject that into the context of the dependency injection thing?
That's an interesting question. I think
because the record is immutable.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I think the record actually might be completely immutable, and you'd have to restart the application. It's one of the reasons why. I need to actually test that. I hate talking about things that we don't have a test for. I'm not sure if I've seen a test for that yet. So it may already be possible, but I don't know. If it's refreshable, it will work, right? Because it would essentially hold it within refresh scope and then discard it. The only thing is, I think refreshable might rely on the fact that you're doing some kind of AOP proxying, which on final classes, such as records are, may not work. So I'm not actually sure of the answer to that one.
Right. Oh, this is a good question.
It is a good question, yes. But an option for that case is to use interfaces, right, where you do name, and which is only marginally more a little bit more writing, right? And then that is definitely refreshable.
Yeah, because you generate the implementation there. Nice. No,
it's still immutable.
Right. This is very cool, and I like how the sort of syntax changes spread very fast through the framework, right? So that means that the application developer can get exposed to those and start using those very fast. Sort of.
That's right. Yeah.
I imagine that happened with Lambdas as well, where frameworks and libraries started offering, like, for example, the methods that take suppliers or the consumers, right? And then you see those in the API, and you're like, even if you don't follow the release cycle or anything, right? You live under a rock, and then you're like, I'm wondering what is this new method here, and then you learn through that. So I think this is very cool. I think this is very
excellent.
Cool. Chat, do we have any questions about records, Bean introspection, or in general Micronaut? This is a unique opportunity. I mean, not unique. Graeme with us fairly often, but this is still a very good opportunity.
For this particular topic, yeah.
While we wait for that for a minute, I wanted to ask you as well, right? So, did you know that today, a thing was released, a patch balancing the different aspects of the new season of Fortnite. It was today.
Wow, that is.
I know that last time I kind of told you that the new season of Fortnite is here, and I'm continuing my educational quest of informing you about the new things in Fortnite. And so today there is a patch.
That's awesome. You'll have to keep me informed. This might actually shock you, but I've never actually played Fortnite, so I'll have to take your word for it.
This is my goal. I will see if we can keep this long enough that by the end of the year I will have you download it at least. Right. No, that was a off topic, of course. Right. So one thing that a sort of serious question, yes. And it's not particularly about the records, right? But I feel like in the Micronaut case that you showed that, for example, that person data transfer, like the mapped entity object with some additional annotations for the dates, which a little bit they add something to the records, right? So, and this goes a little bit more into the area of code generation for simplicity, kind of like reducing the boilerplate that developers need to do, which is a very kind of long withstanding argument for using Lombok, Project Lombok. And you said that you kind of don't like that. And there are different opinions on Lombok, and I don't want to actually question you on the why don't you like it. But the other thing that people use Lombok for is generating loggers.
Yeah.
And since Micronaut is so famous for code generation, do you have a plan to generate some loggers as a convenient annotation?
Why would you need to generate loggers?
I don't know. People generate loggers with Lombok, right? And people generate data classes with Lombok, right? And now people don't have to generate the classes with Lombok because Micronaut provides this excellent opportunity to generate them with records, right?
The logging case doesn't make sense to me because, like, if you use SLF or J, for example, a log statement, a parameterized log statement has like 0 overhead, so you don't even have to wrap it in. Like if is log is debug enable, do this, you just like log. So I don't know why you would use it for logging. I can see why the people use it pre-records for data classes. It is undoubtedly a pain writing this stuff. And I actually, to be fair on Lombok, I'm not like, I think it's its use was amongst certain developers is justified because we didn't have records until recently. But it's more of a pain for other implementers of annotation processes, and I am an implementer of an annotation process in Micronaut. In that, because of the way Lombok works, the way it kind of mutates Java AST using unsupported APIs that are not public, it means that any downstream annotation processor has to kind of factor in those changes and has to write specific support for this is why if you speak to the maintainers of mapstruct annotation processor or any of the and ask them about Lombok, they'll probably have a negative view. But my perspective is warped because I have a particular perspective on this, which is as another author of an annotation processor having to deal with Lombok's things. If you see what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. This is actually a very sensible argument. Never been on the other side, right? On implementing the changes and supporting the Lombok, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't actually have any questions from the chat. We're awfully quiet today. I expected more of us in the chat. People in the chat, whip out your keyboards, and maybe next time. But this is very interesting. Right. I don't have any more questions myself. At least they don't easily come to mind. I think I would need to try this myself, and for quite some time I was just having a very like sort of conservative approach to trying out new Java versions for a number of reasons, and I think now maybe with the upcoming changes here, I would be more interested in trying out new things for sure. Also, one thing that helps that is I think there is an upcoming release of GraalVM based on JDK 16 or 17. We're definitely trying to catch the 17 train, right? To release GraalVM where the base JDK is JDK 17, and I think we starting producing some experimental like nightly builds for 16 as a way to kind of ease out this transition for supporting 17 as well. So I would have a work-related excuse to try and play with Java 6 new features. And I'm wondering, I think this would be records would be like a big on the list why I like the new Javas, as everyone should.
And I'm with you. I spend most of my time working with Java 8. So even things like val or multi-line strings, I've barely gotten to try yet, but looking forward to trying them more. Sure. And
right. Yeah, that's another interesting question here. So I know that some now for a number of years now, projects in the Java ecosystem have this kind of trade-off. Do they stick with compatibility for 8, or for some even more not basic, how do you call the libraries that power everything? The more base functionality libraries, maybe compatibility with even earlier Java releases. But some projects, especially lately, I've seen they migrate kind of sort of further and claim that the base compatibility level, like the base Java level that you have to use to work with them, is Java 11. For example, I think Halidon does that, right? Halidon says that the new Halidon applications, the base level for Java is 11, which I assume allows them to use nicer language syntax features themselves, and maybe workaround of less quirks in the older JDKs. Do you are there any plans for Micronaut to bump the base version? And then that's sort of one question which I don't, if you don't have an answer, but then what would be are there plans to even think about that, right? Or are you stuck? Are you Java 8 forever?
Yes, we had a recent Micronaut technical advisory board meeting where we discussed the Java 8 situation, and it was agreed that basically Micronaut 3 will be the last major version to support Java 8. So Micronaut 3 is targeting release end of Q2. So after that, Micronaut 4 will be Java 11 only, not in time. But we're kind of putting it off till 4 because we know that we will have to, if we do this and drop support for Java 8, we'll have to prolong the support for older versions of Micronaut for a longer period of time, right? We'll have to essentially maintain bug fixes and so forth and so on for multiple branches for for some time yet, which we will have to do anyway when we make that switch. But if we can push that out one more major release, then it's less maintenance burden for us, right? It's just easier to build everything with Java 8. at least in the core part. But there are like parts of Micronaut that don't work on Java 8 already, right? I know that, all of the core works in Java 8, right? But certain, like I know, for example, the modules for Google Cloud have already moved to Java 11. So if you choose any of the Google Cloud integrations with Micronaut, from Micronaut launch, you get an error saying you need Java 11. And sometimes we have the inverse situation. Like up until recently, Azure Cloud only worked with Java 8. I think that's changed now. But there was a time where we had to give an error if somebody chose Java 11 and where they were trying to build with that cloud. So there's one of the great challenges of this, all these different cloud providers is figuring out which Java version is supported and running and so forth. So yeah, there's certain modules that don't support, but they're like modules, individual modules, right? That don't support Java 8 anymore. And I imagine that will increase over time. In particular, like for example, some key libraries like Caffeine, for example. The Caffeine is a in-memory concurrent hash map. Have released a new major version that's gone Java 11 only recently. So at some point we will have to we will definitely make the plunge and go on this adventure of supporting multiple branches for a while until everybody has migrated.
No, of course, that is the progress that works. There's no way to go around that.
Yep.
Yeah. Java moves forward as the project. The language evolves, the runtime evolves, and of course the ecosystem has to evolve as well. There's just no way around that. Did we come up with any questions in the chat? I'm not sure. Is my chat actually working? It would be embarrassing if the people were typing questions there and it's just me who didn't see them, but I don't think so. I think we're... Oh my God, do you see this? Is that on your end or
wow.
my end?
No, I just stopped sharing my screen and now it's like showing Zoom everywhere.
Oh, I know. This is just me, right? This is my camera that I'm showing you. This is a very cool special effect. Right, let's stop this because that might make people uncomfortable.
Going to dimension.
Right. Yeah, very cool. I've seen other the new jobs that are coming that are being proposed, and some of them are very interesting. But I don't think we should talk about right now. But eventually, I would absolutely love to ask you and your opinion on those things and new jobs and the development process as well. Do you how, like, a quick question maybe here, like, and let me just, I'm not sure how to do this. Let me just do this. I will make a large U here.
Excellent. I'm bigger. Yay.
Yeah, you're bigger, and now then I don't even know how to make myself to kind of how to show myself. Okay, I'm also large enough here, right? So how closely do you work with the say OpenJDK team, like with trying and like weighting in on different decisions and different developments? It's an open source project, right? So there are people just sending emails to the mailing lists, and I assume that as a popular framework kind of maintainers, you would, like, not you personally, but maybe someone on the team would have quite a bit of interest to kind of come to the JDK team and also saying like, oh, look, there are some upcoming changes, like, can we maybe think about certain use cases as well? Is that collaboration happening? And how does it work?
Yeah, so we participate with Micronaut in the OpenJDK Early Access program and run our tests with the early access builds and provide feedback through that channel as well. More recently, I'm starting to get involved in discussing with the Java team certain aspects, and that's still there's certainly particular projects that I'm interested in, Loom and Valhalla, and then obviously things that I have a great deal of interest in seeing which direction they progress. So for sure, those areas I absolutely have a desire and interest to be involved in those discussions, and I'm subscribed to the OpenJDK mailing list and have conversations with Brian and Gutz and others. And yeah, well, interesting to see where it all evolves. And certainly I would like to be more involved. I think Valhalla, for example, is certainly something interesting from my perspective as well. Value types and so forth.
Yeah, I think the Valhalla is one of the projects that people have been waiting for for a long time, for multiple consecutive releases, and yeah, but it will get there. Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. From my side, I would encourage you also to, like everyone who is watching, to participate in the life and development cycle of your favorite open source projects, because that's how you build a community, that's how you make your voice heard, and that's how you make the whole ecosystem better, right? So if you are using Micronaut, just come join the GitHub repositories, start them, look at them, submit issues, submit like items for discussion. I'm sure the team would absolutely love all support that you can give, even if it's just a positive feedback. I mean, the positive feedback counts for a lot. People who are responsible for looking through GitHub issues, I can tell you, like, there's not often you see positive feedback there. Like, it's mostly the requests about urgent fixes and negative feedback, right? So, like, if you're watching, just go find your favorite GitHub project and congratulate them and say thank you. Right. So, with that in mind, thank you, Graeme, for this session. That was really cool. That was very insightful, and as usual, the code looked very neat and elegant, which I like a lot.
In my quickly hacker typed out code.
No, it was good. I think it was very good. So thank you very much. We are going to wind down here and see you. Actually, this week is a little bit interesting because I will see you all actually tomorrow. We have a meetup with some people on the tooling team. Actually, Graeme, you will be there as well, right? Or are you not there?
I'm actually not involved in that one. I'm going to let the tooling guys shine and show their hard work, which has been amazing.
Right. Yes. Okay. Very good. So there will be Martin Balin and Jaroslav Tulach, and we're going to talk about the VS Code extensions that GraalVM team supports and manages and creates, and how the tooling simplifies development of applications and how that tooling works specifically with certain aspects of GraalVM. So that is very interesting. That will be the same time the stream was today, so 6 p.m. Central European time. I'm very bad with time zones, so I'm not sure what is that in US, but it was the same as like this today, so like 1 hour less than right now. So I welcome you all there, and for now we're gonna say thank you, Graeme, and just wrap it up. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. All right, we're gonna close the stream. Graeme is off, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna end the stream. Thank you, people, for the kind words. Thank you, Little Licks, and thank you, Mickwick, for the words. That was nice. I enjoyed the stream. I think it was kind of cool. The API looks neat. The records look neat as well. If you haven't watched the I have this the stream about like Oleg learns Java past 8 and 11. That is available on YouTube. I think you can just type the YouTube command right in Slack, and you can see the link to YouTube, so you can join that, and you can see where Nikolai Parlok, who is the developer advocate on the Java team, teaches me some use cases about records. And it's a sort of funny video. Like, there are a couple of funny moments there. One of them is when I stuck in VI because I couldn't exit. That wasn't entirely my fault, but that was a classic example of being a funny little moment. Right, so I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much, and yeah, bye.